Hi everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and I'm back in the kitchen again. Seems like the only three places I am lately is the garden, the greenhouse, or the kitchen. Oh well, it is that time of year. But today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to bake. Now I'm going to bake two different kinds of baked goods. And what's really unique about both of these and what they both have in common is you don't cook them in the oven. Now, one of the nice things about not using the oven at this time of year is we're supposed to hit just about 100 degrees. And let me see what temperature it is right now. It is 10:30 in the morning and it is 95 degrees. So you can guess what it's going to be by about 2 o'clock. I actually think we're going to hit past 100 today, but be that as it may. I've already started my first batch of dough and it's already proofing. Now, for those of you who haven't done this with me before, let's start from the beginning. The reason I'm only showing you the proofing part and all that sort of stuff once is because it's essentially the same for pretty much every type of bread that you make. Just follow the instructions. Usually I do everything by hand, but I was listening to a professional chef on YouTube the other day, and his theory is that a lot of people won't make something if they think they have to do it by hand. So today I'm using my stand mixer. You can do it either way, and showing you with a stand mixer, if it helps a few people get past the I don't want to do it by hand or I don't know how to do it by hand stage, awesome. I think it's really important that everybody tries to do this kind of stuff at least once or twice in their life. And as a friend said, she was in the grocery store the other day and there was a gentleman in the baking aisle and he was reading a package of flour. And she said, "Ah, you gonna bake?" And he said, "Yep." He says, "I have discovered something I never knew. I can make bread really well." How cool is that? You know, and this is a guy that's in his late 40s, early 50s. Just discovered he knows how to bake when he follows a recipe. And it's not that hard and he's got a knack for it. Never bad to have a knack for something. Step one. Clean bowl. This bowl happens to go to my KitchenAid mixer. You do not have to use a mixer. I'm doing this because, as I said, we're showing the mechanized version of this. I have my recipe right here. And this recipe is for English muffins. You guys have seen me do English muffins before, but you've seen me do it all by hand. I'm going to keep the other bread a secret until just a little bit later. It's proofing right now, and it has another hour and 15 minutes at least to proof. So, my other bread is proofing right now, and it has about an hour and 15 minutes to proof. So, I am going to start the second one. It doesn't need to proof for as long. Now, what does proof mean? Proof means to let it set after the ingredients have been mixed together so that the yeast can do its job and any chemical changes that are going to occur in the flour mixture are going to happen. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to take 1 1/4 cups of warm water and we're going to add some sugar and yeast. This is a just barely warm kettle, so it has water in it. And there's 1 1/4 cups of water, warm water. Then I'm going to add some sugar to it because the yeast is going to be hungry. And then I'm going to add my yeast. And this will be 1 teaspoon of yeast. Now this is Fleischmann's active dry yeast. I get nothing from Fleischmann's. It just happens to be my favorite version. I have used other ones. Actually, this, come to think of it, is not Fleischmann's. This has actually been refilled. No, it's been refilled from a giant commercial size of Fleischmann's. I fibbed. Anyway, I do not like the, what do they call that? Quick yeast or something like that. It changes the flavor. So I recommend using a regular active dry yeast. What octave dry means is the yeast is just sort of sitting there waiting to grow. And as soon as you put it in a little bit of warm water, now that water should be less than 110 degrees or you'll kill your yeast. So to me, that's just slightly warm water. I have fairly iron fingers from, or asbestos fingers, from working in both jewelry and in the kitchen. But it should be a comfortably warm water. As not the barbecue bath type water, but just something you could put on your inside of your wrist and be comfortable with. Maybe for those of you who have ever fed babies, baby formula. So just about body temperature. Okay, now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to cover this with a towel to keep the dust out, because I live in a dusty environment. And I'm going to let it sit for 10 minutes. And when it is done sitting for 10 minutes, this yeast will have activated and it'll be ready to be used. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes has gone by. Perfect. Let me show you what your yeast is going to do. That almost looks like dough, doesn't it? It's not, though. See? The yeast has just come alive. It's eating the sugar. It's all happy, ready to get mixed in with flour and other stuff and become a baked item. In this case, English muffins. Now that the yeast is happy, I am going to add oil, flour, and salt. Now, if you actually watch super closely today, I'm making a double batch. So it will not be exactly what you guys would be doing. There's some oil. And I'm going to add half my flour, throw my salt in the middle, and add the rest of the half of the flour. I like to do that because salt slows down yeast. And, oops, this is the wrong kind of flour. Using two different kinds of flour today. Get the other flour. Okay, this is what I wanted, bread flour. You do not have to have bread flour. I happen to own it, and I think it works better for certain things, certain types of bread than others. So, 1, 2, and of course I'm wearing a black shirt, shows every bit of flour. I was going to wear an apron and discovered that both of the aprons I could find this morning that were not Christmas aprons or something else like that had tomato sauce and pickles on them. So I'll just have to have a floured stomach today. It's okay. And salt. You can use pretty much any kind of salt you want. The big thing is if you use something like a coarser salt, like the ground salts or some of the kosher salts or things like that, make sure that they dissolve completely in the liquid that you're using. One of the problems we have had before with kosher salt in particular, that's the washing machine. Washing those aprons that have stuff on the front. Anyway, one of the problems with kosher salt that we've had in the past is that it didn't dissolve completely, so you wound up with salty spots in your dough. We don't want that. So I'm using a finer salt on purpose. And like I say, I am making a double batch. So that's why this seems like so much flour. It's because it is. We figured out that we like to have a lot of English muffins on hand. They can last us up to a month sometimes, but I bake them all at once because if I'm going to make a mess, I might as well get it over with. And I can stick them in the freezer. They reheat beautifully. So, okay, I have my oil, my flour, and my salt. Now, I'm going to put this on the mixer. I've got my dough hook on there. I'm going to lock it down. And I'm just going to turn it on the lowest speed and start running it. And I'm going to run it until everything is completely incorporated, or at least it looks like it is. And then I'm going to get in there with a wooden spoon, scrape the bottom to make sure there's not any reservoir of flour at the bottom, which can happen sometimes. And then once it's all nice and neat and tidy, I am going to let it run for probably another 3 minutes, 4 minutes. I want it to be, it's a sticky dough, but I want it to remain sticky. I'm not going to be in a hot hurry to add a lot more flour to it. And we're just going to mix it until it's ready. And I'll bring you back when it's ready. Right now, it looks like this. You can see it's starting to come together, but there's still a lot of flour around the outside. But it's gradually sort of eating away at the outside. So I'll see you again in a couple of minutes. I've run this for about 5 minutes. You can see it's very sticky. This dough is actually a very easy dough to work with in the sense that it's very forgiving, but it's also, for a beginning, a little messy because the stickiness of it can be kind of annoying. All I'm doing is scraping down the sides with a wooden spoon. It can be any kind of a spatula, it doesn't make any difference. This is just one of my favorite wooden spoons that I tend to use for baking. And I'm going to get in here and make sure there is no flour underneath the dough. And there isn't. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you'll wind up with a little reservoir of dry ingredients at the very bottom. I don't want that. Okay. Now, here comes the gooey part. I got some flour on here. I'm going to scrape this off. And I'm one of those fussy people who generally gets off most. I don't like the waste. Good enough. And now I'm going to flop this out on my floured board. Woo. Now remember, the batch I have here is twice the size of the one that you will have. I'm scraping with a spoon. You can also, scrape with one of these plastic things. They're sort of like a handleless spatula. I got this one like 1.5 million years ago. Literally, we were still in the Stone Age at the time. Actually, it would only be a few thousand years ago if we were in the Stone Age. Some people prefer the scrapies like this. Other people prefer the regular spatula. Do whatever works for you. I just happen to have this out here from another project. Now, you can use a clean bowl if you want to. I don't. By a clean bowl, I mean this is the bowl that I used for making the dough in. It's not dirty. It's just got a little bit of stuff in it. Going to put in about a tablespoon of olive oil. Does not have to be olive oil. I have used olive oil, I have used peanut oil, I have used avocado oil. You could use pretty much anything that's not super flavorful. So do not use something like any EVO, extra virgin olive oil, unless you want your bread to taste like extra virgin olive oil. And I personally don't want my English muffins tasting like extra virgin olive oil. Now, you can see that you can't feel it, unfortunately, but when I pull my finger away, it's just a little bit tacky. If I were to disturb the inside of this ball, and all I'm doing is sort of rolling it around a little bit to consolidate it. I am not kneading it. Kneading it would be, if I did this, it would be kneading it. Then I would have to get my hands more floured. But I want this, in this case, I let the mixer do the kneading. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plop this in here. And I'm shaking it around because I want that entire bottom side of this to be coated with olive oil. And I'm going to flip it over. And all that's going to do is help to prevent a crust from forming on the outside of your dough. It's also really good for your hands. Now I'm going to cover this, and I am going to let it sit for an hour. I'm going to put it someplace warmer than the kitchen. I could leave it in the kitchen today. In fact, I may just leave it in the kitchen today. But I'm going to have this someplace warm. Usually I put it near the freezer in the pantry because it's a propane freezer, so you've got a heater associated with the freezer. And I put it near the exhaust. That's where my other dough is sitting rising right now. I'll come back in an hour, and we'll see you then. Okay, the first batch of dough that I was proofing to get ready for baking is done. And now I will reveal what it is. Remember, I said neither the English muffins nor this other thing require an oven to cook them. And the first batch of dough is for pita bread.